Hello, Garland, Nixon, a lot of things going on, and the Neocon project is fading away very, very quickly. Let's talk. Hello, Garland here. Been kind of busy this week, so I haven't made as many videos as I normally do, but that is about to change starting right now. So let's talk about what's happening. A lot of things going on. And, the title of my video is about the Neocon project being in collapse. And I'm very big on definitions, kind of like when someone writes a law. When you write a law or a statute or whatever the case may be, which I have been involved in doing before, at least writing regulations, at least, and one of the things that's important is definitions. When you say, you name different things in the law, you use different words or the regulations, you have to define what they are. You can't do this. I was involved in writing law definitions in the state, regulations in the state of Maryland for the Department of Natural Resources, and regarding laws that you can and can't do when I was working with the governor's office. And for instance, you can't, I don't know, you can't, jacklight, let's say jacklighting, for people who are in the rural areas. A lot of them know what that means. That means, you shine, if someone shines a light in a deer's eye so the deer freezes and they shoot the deer, that's illegal. But when you say jacklighting is illegal and you use the word jacklighting throughout the statute, you must first in the definitions define jacklighting, right? So people talk about the Neocon project, but what we need to do before we discuss it is define it. What is the Neocon project? Because when you define the Neocon project, it becomes very, very clear whether it is or isn't in decline, in collapse, however you want to interpret what's currently going on with it. So what is the Neocon project? To me, the Neocon project can be summed up in something called the Wolfowitz Doctrine. I believe it was 2002, 2003. In that time period, Paul Wolfowitz worked with the Bush administration. He was a former Democrat. Came out of a place that a lot of the neocons came out of. Some of the top neocons came out of a guy named Henry Jackson, Scoop Jackson. He was a Democrat. He was a Cold War Democrat who tried to I'm going to hate the Russians and I'm going to hate communists even more than the right wing does. So that was his game plan. And that was the Cold War Democrats, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden. They also come out of that ilk, the Cold War Democrats, the Scoop Jackson Democrats. In fact, there's a neocon organization, think tank in London called the Henry Jackson Institute, the Henry Jackson Society, named after Scoop Jackson. Interesting that it's in London. That's a whole nother discussion. The relationship, if you want to call it that, between London and Washington, the whole U.S. empire thing. But at any rate, they are inextricably linked. And Wolfowitz, Pearl, all of those people came out of that. Scoop Jackson literally worked in his office, aides to him, right? And you can see when you look at the type of people that I'm talking about, what kind of person and what kind of mentality that Scoop Jackson had. So on we go. The reason I say that is because Paul Wolfowitz wrote something called the Wolfowitz Doctrine. You can look it up. You can read about it. It was initially extremely harshly neocon, abrasive and aggressive and fascist. And they toned it down a little bit, but they toned the words down, but it still meant the same thing. A unipolar world, U.S. hegemony. What the Wolfowitz Doctrine talked about in a nutshell was ensuring that that there was a world order. Now you hear it from Tony Blinken, the rules-based order. In other words, there is a world order. We're going to call it the rules-based order. They'll say China is the only country that has the power of challenging the current order. What do they mean? They're talking about Paul Wolfowitz's Wolfowitz Doctrine. that it's a world order in which the United States is the unipolar, hegemonic lord of all, in charge of all. It's a hierarchy, right? So some countries have a higher expectation of rights than other countries, and the United States decides who has any expectation of rights, but only in alignment with the world order that the United States creates and maintains and presides over. Right? Not that the U.S. is a part of the world order. Keep in mind something. The Wolfowitz Doctrine didn't say the United States was a part of the world order. The United States maintains a world order. It presides over a world order, right? Now, that's important. Once again, when you ask yourself, is the Neocon project collapsing? When you understand that part of the Neocon project, the Wolfowitz Doctrine, is what? To create and maintain a world order that which is a hierarchy in the world, that the United States is not part of the hierarchy. The United States presides over the hierarchy, right? Something totally different. If you're at the top of the hierarchy, you still operate within the context of the hierarchy. Wolfowitz Doctrine says no country can arise, and they particularly talked about Russia and the Soviet Union, but no country can arise that would be a threat to that world order. No country can arise that will be even a regional power. Iran, Venezuela, right? Venezuela, very, very, a lot of oil, the potential to be extremely powerful as a regional player in South America. Iran, a lot of brilliant scientists, independent minded like Venezuela, a lot of oil, gas, things of that nature. So they've got the intellectual power. They've got a strong culture and history. They've got independence, strong, a strong central government, and they have the natural resources to maintain themselves economically. They have the potential to be the strongest regional power in the Middle East. And one could argue that in a way, they really are. That means what? That can't be allowed. So the Wolfowitz, and if you align the Neocon project / Wolfowitz Doctrine with the list of adversaries and with the current foreign policy of the United States, they line up perfectly, right? So what's going on with Russia? What's going on with China, right? Russia and China are rising, but not only to be regional powers, to be world powers. Now they are organically rising, but the Wolfowitz Doctrine says we cannot allow, under any circumstances, we can't allow anyone to rise that would not be in subservience to us, that would not be willing to accept a world order that the United States presides over, understand their place in the world order. But there is also an unspoken implication here for this reason. This implies that the United States would be benevolent, that the United States has the good of all in mind, right? It implies that we are going to have a world order that the U.S. is in charge of, and the U.S. will look out for everyone. Well, what it leaves out is a truth that the people around the world, particularly in the global South, well understand, and bit by bit, the people in Europe are learning it the hard way. And that is the history of the United States is not one of a benevolent world power, either domestically or externally. If you look at the rise of the United States domestically, you can say the United States did not arise through being developed benevolent to the people in the United States. Neither the indigenous people, nor the slaves, nor even the poor working class white people, right? Look at a perfect example, right? And you might have heard me say this before, but I will, just to speak quickly of domestic policy. I won't spend too much time on this. You know the history of slavery, the history of the indigenous people in America. But keep in mind something. You might have heard this story before. Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin, which became a worldwide famous novel because it exposed the horror and brutality of slavery, right? And one of the things that happened as a result of that was the slave owning class were angry, and they created a genre of books to push back on that, right? And one of the books, the first and the biggest one that was written, it wasn't a very good novel, but it was written, but there was something interesting about it, and it was called The Northern Planter's Bride. And what they did was, it was the first really I would say, really powerful and concrete attack on industrial capitalism, because what they said was, yes, you say we're terrible with our slaves, but of course, they had the slaves are childless little, mindless little childlike people, and we have to look out for them. They left out all the raping and selling and murdering in parts and working them to death. We're looking out for them, benevolent, right? But look at what you people are doing to white people. You've got these big factories, you're working them to death, you're paying them nothing, you're making their lives miserable, blah, blah. And all of these things were true. Now, don't get me wrong. It was the people who had agrarian capitalism, a predatory agrarian capitalism in the South, which was, we want free labor, so we'll have slavery, against people who had a predatory industrial capitalism in the North, who said, we're not going to have slaves, but we'll have cheap labor. So rather than use race as an excuse to turn people into slaves, what we'll do is we will just bring Irish and Jewish and Italian people over here, right? Non-Anglo-Saxon people over there. So we see them as lower on the social hierarchy, and we'll abuse the hell out of them and use them, work them to death in these factories, right? So it was a similar kind of thing. It was various degrees of abusing your workforce. One, they're all out slavery. The next, they're not quite slaves, but they don't have a whole lot of rights, right? But bottom line is this. Why did I say that? Because that was not benevolent. Neither to the slaves nor to the working class whites who were brought over here and treated as the lower class. So if you look at the U.S. history of internally, they were not benevolent. And I don't even get started on U.S. foreign policy. So here's my point on all of that. I'm going somewhere with that. For the Wolfowitz doctrine to argue that a unipolar world in which the United States would be the world hegemon would guarantee a benevolent world wherein the United States would look out for everyone else for the best interest of everyone ran contrary to the history of the United States and how the United States treated the working class and the poor and other people around the world who they wanted their resources and things of that nature. It ran counter to that reality. The reality was that isn't the United States when it ran things, it was not benevolent, and empires aren't benevolent. But here's the reality: to expect an empire to be benevolent in its treatment of the groups that are brought into the empire is not to understand empire. That ain't the way it works. No empires do that. Sorry, you're living in a false world if you believe that, right? So the Wolfowitz doctrine, in reality, just simply says the United States has to be in control of everything. We'll beat the hell out of anybody else and kick them and stomp them and destroy them and murder them. Anybody that tries to stop us, we can run around the world. We can rampage. Oh, by the way, in order to be rich, we need resources from other countries, and we'll go to countries that are either too poor or too weak to defend themselves from us. We'll overthrow their governments. We'll put in compliant puppet governments, and we'll steal all their stuff. So the people in the global South already knew that. They had a long experience with colonialism. So they knew that the Wolfowitz doctrine just meant an extended period of colonialism. No country can rise. So that's the Neocon project, is to extend empire and colonialism for eternity. No country is allowed to rise up that could challenge us. No country is allowed to say no to us. And of course, in the case of Russia and China, when we say to a country in Africa or a country to South America, you will give us your gold, you will give us your oil, you will give us your lithium, you will give us whatever, your bananas, your coffee. No country like Russia and China is allowed to come in and say, we'll make a deal with you. And you don't have to make a deal with the United States. We'll make an alternative deal with you. Maybe we can give you a better deal, because any deal that doesn't involve, we're going to overthrow your government, kill people, and steal all your stuff is probably a better deal than they're going to get from the US. I mean, let's face it, that's what history tells us, right? So the United States was trying to maintain an order of total, complete domination, empire, and economic domination. And organically, there were other countries that were rising. Russia, China, India, I think on and on and on. One of the issues that the U.S. had was this, and this is a big issue, a gigantic issue, and that is the heart of the U.S. empire outside of the 48 contiguous states. The heart of it is Europe. Now, in Europe, you have England, which is an extension of the US empire, part of the US empire. The US didn't include England with the other non-Anglo-Saxon countries, right? It was the US, England, um, Australia, Canada, right? The English speaking, Canada's in question because they got a lot of French speaking people, and but the English speaking countries, particularly when they created AUKUS, what they do, the US, the UK, Australia, the English speaking Anglo-Saxon countries were put into one group. And of course, France and Germany, are in another group. They don't always go along as much as they should, but they have to be held in check. So a big part of the Neocon project was this. If you think about countries around the world that have the potential to rise, that have the potential to be powerful, that have the potential to be independent, what's the most powerful country in Europe outside of Russia, which I consider Eurasian? What are we looking at? Germany. So the big problem for the US empire was always ensuring that Germany and Russia don't align. And there is a natural alignment with Germany and Russia because Germany is an industrial power and Russia has the natural resources very close by to provide the fuel for the German industrial machine. So the US, that's why you see right now, one of the things that the US doing is trying to wipe out Germany, destroy them, steal all of their resources, steal all of their industry, and they blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, right? They're doing everything right now. They're working overboard to get Germany to send tanks to the Ukraine. Why? So they can further rupture any relationship or any possibility that Germany can realign with Russia, that Germany wakes up one day and says, wait a minute, we have a better natural partnership with Russia. Russia is more of an ally. Russia respects us more. Russia can provide the things we need, and Russia doesn't want to dominate us like the United States. If the Germans ever wake up to that, the US is in trouble because they lose Europe. They lose Europe as soon as that happens. They got to make sure that doesn't happen. They blew up the pipeline, and now they're saying to Germany, you have to give tanks to Russia so we can really piss Russia off, and you and Russia can never become aligned again, because that's the big danger. That's the big fear about Europe. So the Neocon project, as I'm saying, and I'm positing here, the Neocon project is in total collapse. And now that we've defined the Neocon project as they want to rule the world, and they want to ensure that no countries can arise that would challenge that order, the world order over which they preside. Now, let me add something else that is important, because that is well understood in the global South. That's well understood throughout the world. That's why Saudi Arabia is now, I got to get the hell out from under the US. And Saudi Arabia wants to go to BRICS. They want to move to Russia, China, things of that nature, right? That's why India wants to do it. That's why these other countries want to do it. Why? Because they're saying to themselves, we have aspirations to be regional or world powers. And we now know if we try to make that move, the United States is going to attack us. They'll blow us up. They'll blow up our pipelines. They'll blow up our infrastructure. They'll use terrorism against us. They'll overthrow our governments. They'll do all the things that they're trying to do to Russia and China. So you've got any and every country now that aspires to be a regional power, or at least a player on the international stage. Again, Pakistan, they're on the run, right? The US overthrew their government, but even the new government is kind of on the run from the United States. Saudi Arabia, on and on and on. They're like, ooh, Brazil, they all aspire to be world powers. And I don't mean dominant world powers. I mean players on the stage where they can make independent decisions, where they can grow their own economy, where they can grow their own international influence. And they now understand clearly, the United States is making it clear, if you try to do that, we will destroy you. So they have no choice. It's not like Saudi Arabia has a choice. The United States has created an environment where the Saudi Arabias of the world and the Indias of the world have a choice. Either you can join with this new world order and have an opportunity to grow and have an opportunity to have independence, or your other option is you can be a vassal of the United States, and the United States, they're some ornery bastards, and you know that they are going to take advantage of you, and that if you don't do what, they're gangsters. If you don't do what they say, they'll kill you, they'll overthrow your government, they'll install puppets, they'll basically enslave your people into economic slavery and take all your independence and sovereignty. And they know that an order, the Eurasian-led order, Russia, China, let's face it, Russia, China, India, led order, and it's not a ruled order. It's not like Russia and China are saying we want to run everything. It's there, but they are the most powerful military and economic entities within that group, and they're saying we're going to use that to fuse as a common bond to all fuse together and to help defend ourselves, right, against this hegemonic power. Well, here's the bottom line. So that's defines the project, that defines the dynamics of the project, that defines the sides of the project, who's who, who's on what side, and why. Now let's get to, is that project in collapse? Now that we've defined that project as a world order in which the United States presides over, and which sides are on who, is that in collapse? Well, let's start here. China is growing and there's nothing they can do about it. China is economically growing. China is the world's economic and industrial, the world's industrial engine, right? Industrial, powerful engine. And China's military is growing, which they have no choice. The US is like, hey, why are you building such a big military? Well, let's see. You're surrounding us with bases and missiles. Maybe that has something to do with it, right? So China knows, and China is looking at the US. We're writing these foreign policy statements that says China's our biggest enemy and China's a threat to our world order and this must be stopped and changed. So we're just basically making it clear and open to the world. We want to take out China. We want to turn China. And what do we want to do? We want to drive them back into poverty that China was as poor as Haiti at one point. And now look at it. They have been very successful with what they do. Now the United States is brainwashing Americans. Americans are walking around like with this, thinking that they're the good guys too. You listen to Americans. Well, the Chinese are doing this. Well, China's doing that. They're like repeating the talking points. A lot of Americans who consider themselves red-pilled and consider themselves, oh, I am understand the evil of the Bidens and the Davos, blah blah blah. But they're repeating all the talking points of the CIA against China because, well, they're brainwashed and they're like, but they're communists and communism is evil, instead of understanding that it ain't none of your damn business what China does. China is a separate country. You're in a country that's falling apart. You're in a country that's a totalitarian state that's destroying your rights. And they're so busy pointing, hey, you're sitting here like, gee, the First Amendment straight out the window, and mandates and all these things that I don't agree with, and I don't get to, basically they shot the president and killed him. JFK, they shot RFK before he could become president. I'm starting to wake up and realize that all the things that the people told me about the FBI, when the communists and the Black Panthers and all those people and the anti-war people and the hippies all said the FBI is terrible, and the conservatives were like, no, get out of here. And now they're like, holy crap, they were all right. The FBI is horrible. It is the Gestapo on steroids, right? So now they're coming to realize that all these people that they thought were terrible, that were saying the FBI is the Gestapo, they're like, oh yeah, perhaps in hindsight, they were the Gestapo. But we're still brainwashed to hate China because we're told that they're the evil communists, even though it's none of our damn business. So it's an imperialist. It is the empire of it is the mindset that we have a right to tell everybody else in the world what to do in their country, that is ingrained into the very DNA and the fabric of the way Americans think, so much so that Americans don't even know it's there, that they have these beliefs. China's evil, and we have a right to decide what China's going to do and tell everybody what they should and shouldn't do. And they think it's their idea. They think they came up with that idea independently, that they were just like, I was sitting around one day and I thought to myself, China, what are they doing 7,000 miles away? And why shouldn't I comment on their lives? Oh, wait a minute. You mean 90% of the people in China, according to according to US polls, 90% of the people in China support their government, perhaps because they pulled so many of their people out of poverty? Fair enough. But it's still an evil dictatorship. But if the Chinese people are okay with what the hell they're doing in China, then we shouldn't be worried about it. And if they're not, it's up to their job to do something about it. Our country's falling apart, imploding, and we need to stop being so brainwashed that we're trying to figure out what China's doing, because that's part of the Wolfowitz doctrine, to indoctrinate you so much that when the neocons take the money that you have a right to have for healthcare or college or fixing your roads or an infrastructure, and they use it to go after China and Russia, that you're going to support it. It's a part of the brainwashing of America. So at any rate, on we go. So forget China. China's growing. U.S. can't do anything about it but go to war with China, which ends up in, some kind of a nuclear confrontation, and see you later. So we won't talk about that. Let's talk about Russia. That's what the current war going on that the neocons have instigated. Let's start with Bakhmut. We'll talk about the various different things. We'll start with Bakhmut, Soledar, etc. What's going on? So for the last year, we might as well say February 24th will be a year, the neocons information war was the main place that they fought the battle. Right, they didn't. The principal place they fought the battle was the information war, because the Ukrainians have never been winning the war. But the U.S. was able to convince their people and people all through over Europe that the Ukrainians were winning. The Russians were on the run. The Russians were running out of missiles, and they were taking washing machine parts and using as missiles. All this foolishness, right? That if you studied it, these things, you would find out that they really didn't make much sense. But they were able to do this information war against their own people and convince them of things, right? Fine, good enough. You got your people convinced. But what we found out in Bakhmut is that the information war, writing an article in Politico, right, and getting everybody to believe it, doesn't do much to stop Russian artillery. That's the reality. You're using information, the Russians are using artillery. I saw this that we're sending the M777 howitzers, the wonder weapons, right? Every time you turn around, again, a public relations stunt. We send something over there. It's a public relations stunt through whatever it was. Oh, this is going to change it. The M777s are going to change it. The HIMARS are going to change it. Remember the NASAMS. We're sending NASAMS over here. They're anti-aircraft. They're going to change it, right? What they were meant to change was the minds of the American people. Public relations. Hey, American people, here's what you got in the information war. We just sent over some other magic thing. Meanwhile, I'm looking at these videos on Telegram, and the Russians literally had these artillery pieces. Now, they got new artillery pieces, right? But they got lots of stuff left over from the Soviet Union. So they had these artillery pieces from the 1940s, but they still fire. And they got wheels, and they drag them out there onto a battlefield, and they point them at the enemy, and they literally open the thing, breach with their hands, and they shove whatever the hell, this big gigantic round in it, and they close it, and they got like this rope. It looked like something from a World War II movie. They're standing back 10 feet from this thing, and they yank on this rope, kabloom, off goes the round, right? Okay, granted, it's not an M777 howitzer with hydrogen cooling and all these other magical things, and it doesn't have what do you call it? It doesn't have a laser guidance and GPS. But if you throw enough of them downrange, the guys on the other side ain't gonna be happy. And that's what the Russians did. They're like, okay, you guys work on the information war. You guys can have the ghost of Kiev, and you guys can have all kinds of articles in the Daily Mail. Putin's got combination of stomach cancer, dementia, heart attack, toe fungus, trench foot, on and on and on, right? Putin's dying of all of these things. Write that in an article, and we're going to have a whole bunch of artillery pieces lined up, heaving artillery downrange, and the Ukrainian soldiers are going to be sitting there catching hot artillery rounds, right? And in the long run, artillery wins over stories in the Kiev Independent, right? So they just kept doing what they were doing, plodding along, throwing artillery downrange. You guys keep writing your articles. We're going to keep throwing artillery downrange. What we're finding in Bakhmut is this: artillery going downrange long enough is going to win. So the U.S. they've got their plan, they've got this project to maintain order, and now they're going. And now there was the setup, right? What's the setup? The setup is the United States says, here's what we're going to do. There's a country next to Russia that Russia finds very important. We're going to use that country to weaken Russia. We're going to go to that country. We're going to overthrow the government in 2014. You know the story from there better than I do, most of you probably. We're going to install this government, and we're going to immediately, Bakhmut was one of the first places they started digging trenches and entrenchments and pillboxes and prepping it and putting up all of these preparations for defense for eventually for war with with Russia. So Bakhmut was the place they came in, they started training. This was the heart of the U.S. empire's plan to take Russia out. Russia's going to come up to Bakhmut, and they'll be able to hold them off there, and the Russian soldiers will be wiped out in waves. And then they wrote articles. The Russians are sending human waves and getting wiped out, right? So you did your plan, you wrote your articles. The only problem is artillery keeps coming down range. I don't care how many articles you write. They got brand new artillery pieces. They've got state-of-the-art artillery pieces, and they got artillery pieces from World War II, and they're yanking on a rope. And it may not be laser or GPS or GLONASS guided. It may not have all this, but if you're on the business end of that artillery round, you're just not gonna. It's not going to be a pleasant day. Ultimately, there's no amount of technology that can stop an artillery piece that's dropping near you. Your legs get blown off, or your eyes get put out, or your scalp gets yanked off. Something's going to happen. It's really going to screw up your day. And it comes from the artillery pieces landing. And that's what the Russians kept doing. And now you've got this town. And again, Bakhmut, there's lots of soldiers, Ukrainian soldiers there. God knows, probably tens of thousands. They're getting surrounded. The Ukrainians can't give up Bakhmut because they've lost so many soldiers there. What the hell are they going to say to the Ukrainian people? Yes, all your wives and sons, all your sons and husbands, in some instances wives and children, were mangled. Your teenage sons were put in uniform and thrown on the battlefield and ripped to pieces by artillery with your fathers and your grandfathers, all this at the same time, to hold on to Bakhmut, and we lost Bakhmut. Right. So they got to pretend that they still have Solidar and they are not losing Bakhmut. All that's great, because they'll win the information war like that on Twitter. They'll tweet, "We're going to win. We must win." I've seen tweets from the pro-Ukrainian people. "We must win. Russia must be defeated." I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't look like a piece of an artillery round to me. That looks like a tweet. And if I got to bet, I'm putting my money on an artillery round over a tweet every single time. The guys are laying in the trenches, and they're ducked down, artillery round blasting all around. Wagner guys strafing them with a machine gun fire, and they're getting a text, "Hey, good news. We won the information war on Twitter." They ain't doing them no good. They ain't coming out of that trench alive. Any way you look at it, right? So what's going on here, and how does it relate to the Neocon project? Remember what the Neocon project is. Russia has to be weakened because they can't be allowed to be a potential world power. They can't be independent enough, particularly Russia, the former Soviet Union, independent enough to push back and to disrupt the U.S. world order in Africa and South America and even in Europe and other countries by providing goods and services that the U.S. does not want to be provided, but providing options that the U.S. doesn't want to be provided, to be militarily powerful enough to hold the U.S. off. You can't have that, because the rest of the world will say, "Hey, you can't kick their ass, then I ain't listening to you. I'll go along with them because I know you can't kick their ass," right? So as the Bakhmut fall, and the U.S. was like, "We're setting up Bakhmut so it can't fall," and now it's going to fall. And when it falls, as Bakhmut falls, which means the Donbass is going to fall, likely there's starting to be, I don't know for sure. I'm not, Demas and Brian Berletic and Scott Ritter and all these people. I don't know this, but I'm starting to see that Bakhmut could be surrounded, that some of these Ukrainian positions with many tens of thousands of soldiers could be encircled to a point where now the Russians are going to say to the Ukrainians and to the West, "You guys got an option. We got 20, 30, 50,000, however many, 10,000, I don't know, however many Ukrainian troops, and they are encircled and they can't go anywhere. And you got an option. We can make a deal and you can spare their lives, or we don't have to make a deal and their lives will not be spared. It's up to you." And the Ukrainian people are sitting on the other side saying, "Our husbands and fathers and sons are encircled by the tens of thousands. Are you going to get them out?" Now, we know the U.S. answer, the U.S. empire's answer would be, screw them. Poles, how many we losing? 50,000. Call the Poles, tell them we need an order for 50,000 Poles to come down here. We just lost 50,000 Ukrainians. We need to replace them with 50,000 Polish bodies. And then when they're done, Romanians, whoever the hell, the U.S. empire, they don't care. They just want to hopefully, ideally weaken the Russians by using the bodies of Ukrainians or Poles or whatever Eastern Europeans that they can get to throw into the meat grinder. But the Ukrainians might not be crazy about that. And some of the Western countries that are aligned ostensibly with the U.S. may not be too thrilled with that either. So as Bakhmut, Solidar falls, as the Russians slowly and carefully and cautiously start to encircle and overwhelm the Ukrainian, the NATO army in Ukraine, it becomes apparent to the world, because the world's looking on, hey, the US said they were going to kick their butt. And the US said, we got France and Germany and England and all these countries, and we're going to beat up on the Russians. And they can't. They can't beat up on the Russians. There's nothing they can do to beat up on the Russians. The Russians are too tough for them. The Russians are kicking their butts. The Russians said to Uncle Sam, either you get the hell out of Ukraine or we'll throw you out. Your choice. That's basically what the Russians said. We need you off our border. Get out of Ukraine. We will not permit it. You're not allowed to see, that is the prime violation of the Wolfowitz doctrine. No country, no leader, no one in the world is allowed to say to the US empire, you're not going to do this. We will not permit it. Because what happened? The Russians sent a piece of paper, a document, to the US empire in last December and said, we want you to get off of our border. We want to get you to get the hell out of Ukraine. We need you to do A, B, C, D, and E. And the United States empire said, what? We're not even listening to that, please. If you remember, Jens Stoltenberg said they don't have a veto. They don't have a say in this, blah, blah, blah. And the Russians were like, okay, well, I guess we're going to find out then. They said, get out or we'll throw you out. You know, it's kind of like you walk on somebody's property and you're bad and you walk in this man's yard and the guy says, look, I don't want any trouble. Please leave my yard. That's his yard. He pays for that property. He pays the mortgage. That's his family looking out the window. He feels responsible for protecting his family and for saying, this is mine. This is my home. I can decide who comes on my property and who doesn't. Don't come up here. And the person says, I'm not leaving. And the guy says, well, if you don't leave, it's going to be me and you. And the guy says, all right, let's go. Let's dance. And they go to fight. And one person's going to win and one person ain't. And that's where Russia was. Russia's like, get off our lawn. And the US empire says, we're not listening to that. And the Russia's like, well, if you don't, we're going to have to figure this out. And we're going to have to step outside. US empire said, do what you must. And they went to the old, and the weak suffer what is it? And the powerful do what they may, and the weak suffer what they must. And the Russians said, that crap don't play around here no more, buddy, because we ain't weak. And so now the world looks on, that particularly the global South. And now one of the reasons that you see Saudi Arabia starting to say, look, perhaps we will drop the petrodollar and start selling oil in riads or renminbi or whatever we want to sell it in, is because they're looking on. And people aren't scared of the US anymore. They're like, the Russians told you get off our lawn and you said no. And the Russians are in the process of throwing you off their lawn. And it don't look like you got a whole lot of options right now. Looks like you can get thrown off their lawn. That's it. What are you going to do? Commit suicide? You know good and well that if you start to fire this thing up, that they're going to nuke you and you're going to die. You can't win. Are you going to commit suicide? That's your only option. And the US allies, so Bakhmut now, really, what does Bakhmut do? Taking Sodar Bakhmut, it kills it destroys the part of the info war that where the neocons argue they're going to win, and the Russians are losing, and the Russians are weak, and Putin's an idiot, and the Russians are incompetent militarily, and they're going to lose. And now the world is looking on saying, based on what I see in Bakhmut, you guys are about to lose this one. You need to get off this man's lawn because he's in the process of throwing you out. You got one foot in the air and you're upside down. Your head's on the ground and your feet in the air. You're losing. Right. So Bakhmut puts a lie to the argument that the US can dominate anybody they want to militarily, that when it comes down to it, the US will say, do something. And if you don't do it, they'll physically force you to do it. And now people are looking at Russia saying, you can't do that anymore. You can't do that. It's over. Game over. That's the first part of the Neocon project that has collapsed. It has collapsed. The argument ain't there no more. People are looking at it. And now we see things like this. Let me share this with you. We see a good old General Milley Fighting Russia is very, very difficult for Ukraine. While Kiev has vowed to seize huge tracts of what is now Russian territory, Moscow's forces have won a series of key battles. Think about those two things, right? What is he saying? He's saying, while Kiev has said they're going to do something, has vowed to do this, Moscow has kicked their butt on the battlefield. You got an alligator mouth and a Tweety bird behind. Millie, Kiev is saying this is what they're going to do. And the Russians keep throwing artillery shells down range. You ain't winning that one. And he goes on to say, Ukraine will struggle to make good on its promise to drive Russian forces out of its former territory, as Millie says, right? President Biden, President Zelensky, and most of the leaders of Europe have said this war is likely to end in negotiation. That's what he said. From a military standpoint, this is a very, very difficult fight, right? So what he's saying, I still maintain that for this year, it would be very, very difficult to militarily eject the Russian forces from every inch of Russian occupied Ukraine, right? And he goes on to say, that doesn't mean it can't happen, doesn't mean it won't happen, but it'd be very, very difficult. Well, they have changed their tune, have they not? From the Russians are going down to, well, you know, based on what I'm looking at, it probably be a little difficult to take Crimea back, considering the fact that they're losing territory and they're actually going in the wrong direction right now. So I don't think the fact that they're losing territory and being routed aligns with the argument that they're going to take more territory. That's kind of what General Milley is saying. And if this PR machine, propaganda machine has to backtrack, then it's far worse than they're actually saying. But what does that mean? That means that on the battlefield, they're looking at Soledar and Bakhmut, and they know it's game, set, and match. And that means that, and they're saying, and he says it's going to end in negotiation. Well, wait a minute. If you are the world hegemon, if you do preside over a world order that you control and maintain, then you don't need, nothing ends in negotiation. You don't negotiate if you're in charge of the entire world. If you're the emperor of the world, you don't negotiate. You tell people what to do and they do it. So now he's saying we're going to have to at some point negotiate with Russia. Now that presumes that Russia wants to negotiate. What if Russia says, I got nothing to negotiate, I'm winning. We're going to take what we want and you're going to shut up and deal with it, which I suspect was going to be Russia's position. We will take what we want. If you want it, look, what are you talking about? Last December, we gave you a list of what we wanted. Call us when you're ready to say yes to those things. If not, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. If you think you can stop us, go for it, because we ain't stopping unless somebody stops us. Now, militarily, the Neocon project has fallen because it can't use military power to force its will on the world. Now let's go to another one. And this is, so what else? That means in order to maintain that unipolar project over the world, you must maintain complete and total authority over your vassals in Europe. Macron issues warning on Europe's future. According to the French president, the continent must decide whether it wants to be free or a vassal of China or the United States. Now, he can say that all he wants to. Here's what I think it means. They know that China's not make them a vassal, but they have to throw China in there because he can't just say the United States is running us over and we got to get out the hell from under these fruitcakes, right? So he goes on to say, Europe has found itself in the throes of an unprecedented crisis of the Ukraine conflict. French President Emmanuel Macron said on Thursday, he added that the continent has to choose whether it's going to be free or blah, 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 right? In terms of economics, the world is defined by the polarity between the US and China, and Europe has yet to decide whether it wants to become the vassal of one or two. China's not asking it to be a vassal. While Europe has so far been unable to fully reply to this question, well, yeah, they have. The answer is we are vassals of the United States. So no, the answer is there. The rest of the world knows that they blew up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, for God's sake. That ain't an answer, and you did nothing. And Denmark and and Sweden and these other countries are like, we're doing an investigation into the Nord Stream pipeline. We can't figure out who did it, but it wasn't Russia. Oh, yeah. Hey, how about those Bears? Huh? Did you go to the World Cup? Everybody knows who did it. So yeah, you're vassals and you're weak and you're pathetic. Macron believes. Now listen to this. The answer is, according to Macron, an economically, technologically, and militarily sovereign Europe. Uh-oh, there goes the Neocon project and the Wolfowitz doctrine. So we've established, at least I've established, that the Wolfowitz doctrine, the Neocon project of world domination, is collapsing on the battlefield in Ukraine. Now Macron's out there saying, hey, man, we need to be free from these nutcases. They're friggin' insane, and they're going to screw our lives up. In fact, they're already screwing our lives up. We want out. Uh-oh, that's a problem. Huge problem. Again, it indicates collapse of the Neocon project. That means that they're falling off, right? He goes on to say, now listen to this. He sounds like Putin. The EU rushed to rapidly expand to the east in the belief that the problems had been solved once the Cold War ended, the French president said. Now the EU has two groups of nations that have different views on the bloc's future, right? He's talking about Poland versus how they see things. He added that Eastern Europe seeks more national autonomy within the EU. What is he talking about? He's talking about Hungary. Hungary saying we want to be in the EU, but we want to be free to do what we want, right? Adding that Eastern Europe seeks more national autonomy, we have to know how to listen to them. He's saying, look, Hungary's saying we want to do what we want to do. We don't want to be pushed around, and Macron's saying we got to listen to that. That doesn't sound according to the Wolfowitz doctrine. You're supposed to say, "I'm sorry, Hungary. We all have to do exactly what the United States tells us, so you have to fall in line." The global capitalist system itself is in a crisis since it no longer lifts people out of poverty, but only causes inequalities to skyrocket. Yeah, as a neoliberal guy who worked for the Rothschild Bank would well know, right? But he's got to admit the truth. The French people are in the streets and they're sharpening up the guillotines. And he's like, hey, perhaps we should reconsider taking all of the food out of the mouths of the citizens. They may not be happy and they're sharpening guillotines, for God's sake, right? He goes on. So that's the bottom line. Macron has also insisted Europe should be less dependent on NATO and pursue a strategic autonomy. There you go. Again, the neocon project is collapsing in that Europe is saying, I'm not too thrilled about this. I'm not happy about what's going on. This ain't working for us. Meanwhile, and you're probably already familiar with this, there are at least two German former generals now, very powerful people in the military establishment in Germany, have come out. One of them was a General Kujat, Kujat, I believe. The other is General, I believe, like Vought, something like that. Anyway, both of them came out with basically the same thing. And they said something down this line. The U.S. started this crap. They're screwing us over here in Germany. We're on the verge of World War III. We don't need to go along with this craziness, and we need a way out. We need an off-ramp. This ain't working for us. This is madness. This is the U.S. versus Moscow, and it ain't working for us. They basically came out and said, we know who the neocons are. We know what they're trying to do. We don't like it. We ain't on board. It's hurting us. It's hurting us. So what you're now seeing is internally, you're seeing Germany start to wake up at some of the highest levels of power. You're starting to see the military establishment in Germany saying, hey, man, look, this is not in our best interest. You bastards blew up the Nord Stream 2. Oh, and by the way, you want to disarm us. You want to take all of our military stuff and give it to Ukraine. We won't even be able to defend ourselves. And then the U.S. is going to come to us in the same way the U.S. is saying, we blew up the Nord Stream 2, so you don't have gas. We'll sell it to you at 4 to 7 times what we're selling to our own people, number one. And now they're saying, yeah, go ahead, send your tanks and everything over. Send all the artillery pieces, send everything over so you're totally unarmed. Oh, well, wait a minute. You need new military stuff? We'd be happy to sell it to you for double the price that it's worth. They realize they're being took, hammered, hoodwinked, bamboozled, misled, led astray. They realize they're being lied to. They realize they're being took. And the problem is the U.S. empire, that's what it does to people. And some of these people are waking up saying, I don't like it. And the Germans are waking it up and saying, we know they're looking at the U.S. and they say, we can see what you're doing. Now Germany is a country that's been completely emasculated. It has been humiliated and degraded like no other country in the world. The United States, literally Biden brought Olaf Scholz over here and just degraded him in front of international media, said, look, you idiot, shut up. I'm going to shut down Nord Stream 2 and you don't have a say. And Scholz was just babbling like an idiot, a weak chump. And he went back and they blew up Nord Stream 2. And what did you see from Germany? You did not a peep out of them. The German people was once a proud country. Granted, they've done a few things in history that we may not want to discuss right now because perhaps they could have been done differently. Okay, but here's my point. That being said, the U.S. has done some things that are bad, on and on and on. Let's set that aside for now. People looked at Germany and they're like, man, they got great engineers. They make Mercedes-Benz, for God's sake. They make Porsche and things like that. Yeah, they may break down a lot, but at least they're fast and they look cool. Convertibles, convertible Porsche. When you're a young man, you get a convertible Porsche, you're picking up the babes, guaranteed. Guaranteed. Convertible Porsche, he's going to pick up the babes. You're in a bar. Yeah, why don't I take you for a ride to the bar in my convertible Porsche? You're getting a date. It's happening with a good-looking babe. It's just the way it works. So the Germans made convertible Porsches, for God's sake, right? And then they got Siemens, and they're making literally cool washing machines. Bosch makes all kinds of stuff, right? So people looked at the Germans and like, these Germans, they got a little something going on with the engineering, right? And then people thought that they were a proud nation. And then Biden emasculated them, slapped them around, told them what to do. Scholz came over here, got humiliated and degraded and abused in every way, shape, and form. And now the world looks at the Germans and I mean, just with their heads hung down. The world looks at Germany and they're like, you people, oh my God. You're too smart for this. You allow leaders like this, Annalena Baerbock. You know what Annalena Baerbock did to the German people? What Olaf Scholz, what Joe Biden did to Olaf Scholz. She literally said, I don't care what the German people said. I don't care what the voters say. We're supporting Ukraine. That was, in fact, the same thing that Joe Biden said to Scholz. He said to Scholz, look, I don't care what you say. We're getting rid of Nord Stream 2 and shut up and get out of the way. Angela Baerbock said the exact same thing to the entire German people, electorate. They listening to you. Shut up. Go back, eat your friggin' schnitzel, drink your stein of beer, and shut up. I ain't listening to you. Don't work for you. Get out of my life and stay out of it. That's what Annalena Baerbock said to the German people. So the German leaders have been humiliated and degraded and abused by of all old, decrepit, demented people. Joe Biden, God knows this guy's no FDR by any stretch of the imagination. So your leader gets abused by this guy. Then Annalena Baerbock comes out and gives the whole cornhole treatment to the entire electorate, and they don't throw her out of office. So the world's looking at Germany saying, my God, you people, you're the most embarrassed people on the face of this earth. You've been, I mean, just mistreated in the most horrific way. And you're just like going to sit there and take it. That's how the world, sadly, if I've got some Germans watching right now, I love you. I feel sorry for what's going to you. I feel sorry for this humiliation and degradation that has been reaped by your leaders and Joe Biden on your people from the world. And I implore you to do something about it. People are looking at you because, let's face it, the Germans, they've got some good engineering, sure, but people are now looking at the Germans like that nerd in high school, the guy that was kind of smart, but he couldn't get a date, and he was like, he had like no athletic ability whatsoever. He couldn't even like really play kickball. He kicked the ball and it would go straight up and hit him in the he had a little pocket protector. He was pretty good in algebra, but like he was a complete, idiot running around, no social graces whatsoever. I mean, he was just an embarrassment to himself at all times, but he was pretty good in math. That's the way people look at Germany now. Yeah, they're kind of smart, but my God, they're going to let themselves get humiliated on a world stage like this. Hide your face, Germans, please. Hide your face. You're kind of embarrassed right now. Let's hope you come out of it. And I love my German friends and German people. And hey, man, I feel that Germany's waking up. When I see these generals say this, I believe that all those stinking blue and yellow flags are going to end up in the trash can in the long run, and that somehow the German people are going to wake up, regain their power, and say, we're not putting up with Annalena Baerbock and Olaf Scholz. They ain't telling us what to do. It's coming. It's coming. And these two German generals are showing it. Now, Ramstein Air Base, what happens? There's cracks in NATO, and what's his name? Mr. Raytheon, the guy who used the Raytheon to Biden administration pipeline. Lloyd Austin goes there and pretty much tries to boss the Germans around. He goes there. We're gonna have a meeting. Okay, Germans, you will give those Leopard tanks to the Ukrainians, and the Germans are like, yeah, no, we're not. Which is a start. Good start, German. Good start. You moved in the right directions. And they're like, well, you must do that. And they're like, oh, really? Yeah. Well, here's what we'll do. You giving them Abrams tanks? Well, of course not. Don't you know who we are with the U.S. empire? We don't have to give up Abrams tanks. We don't have to do anything. Shut up. Do what you're told. Give them Leopard tanks. And the Germans said, yeah, we'll give them Leopard tanks when you give them Abrams tanks, and not a minute sooner. And you know why we're telling that? Because we know you're not giving up the Abrams tanks. We know you are going to disarm us, not you, and we'll be weak and you'll still be strong, and you'll sell us more stuff, and you'll steal all our industry, and you'll leave us laying on the floor curled up in the fetal position sucking our thumbs, and we had enough of that crap. We ain't doing it anymore. Congratulations, Germans. Now, I don't know how long the Germans can hold out on that, but let's just say this: congratulations, Germans. You're finally waking up, and you're putting the pressure on these schmucks enough that they're waking up and they're having no choice but to say no to the Americans. The Germans would never say no to the Americans. They've already blown them. I expect attacks. Wouldn't surprise me if there's American bombers bombing Berlin before I finish this, because let's face it, Germany is an occupied territory. You need to get those bases the hell out of Germany, because those are not bases of allies. Those are bases of occupation. That's what the U.S. does. It occupies Germany. It occupies Germany so it can threaten Germany, and it may just bomb Germany. Well, wait a minute. It's already bombed Germany. You got nothing to lose. Kick them the hell out of Germany. And don't spare the horses doing that. Get that done as quickly as possible. Just recommending that for the Germans. You don't have to take my advice, but I get a feeling that you're starting to look in that direction, right? So my point is, when it comes to Ramstein Air Base, right, what did I say? Bakhmut, what's going on there? The Russians are winning the war, and they're using artillery to win the war as opposed to tweets. And my guess is artillery tweets. Artillery tweets. I would rather have you tweet mean things to me than throw artillery rounds at me. So in the end, the guy with the artillery probably going to defeat the guy with the tweets. Could be wrong, but let's keep an eye on and see how that works. See how social media works against artillery. I kind of don't think that's going to win the battle. Furthermore, Macron's coming out, and Macron's saying, hey, woo, time out. We might need some independence and sovereignty. Now, it may be bullcrap, but the fact that he says it says that he knows he has to say it, because the French people are sharpening up the guillotines. Now, the U.S. sends Lloyd Austin, the Raytheon puppet, over to Ramstein Air Base, the occupation base for the, of course, they had to have the meeting there. You notice they didn't have it at the Bundestag. You notice they didn't have the meeting at like some German military or some German political hall. Of course not. They had it at Ramstein. It was a reminder. We're in charge. We're going to Germany, and you come to our base in Germany because you're going to be taking orders from us. Germany, send them the tanks. And the Germans like, nah, we ain't sending them the tanks. Now, based on how Olaf Scholz has been, it probably was more like, Germany, send them the tanks. Sir, what was that? I didn't hear you. What? Send them the tanks. He didn't come out and say, no, we're not sending you the tanks. It was, the generals told me I'm not allowed to. I'm sorry, I can't do it. He probably did that. Knowing Schultz, he broke down. He cried a little bit. He sucked his thumb for a while. He begged Lloyd Austin's pardon. He went in the other room and got his shoe shine kit. He shined his shoes. He took one of those little dusters and dusted the lint off of his clothes. He kissed his ring a couple times. He begged his forgiveness and pardon 100 times in a row, and then said, sir, if it was up to me, I would give you everything in the country without question. But the generals won't allow me. I can't go back to them. They told me. And then he broke down and cried and fell on the floor and pooped himself. That's what Olaf Scholz did. But in the end, the good thing is he knew that he couldn't go back to his military. He couldn't go back to the Bundestag, what the hell's the Bundestag? I wish I knew. Bundestag? I don't know. It sounds like a really nice beer, Bundestag beer, right? Like you get a Stein and it has like a picture of like an elk with antlers on it or something, and it's a nice dark beer with a lot of body, and you drink it and go afterwards. And you do stuff like this. We love to drink. And what are you drinking? Bundestag. And down it goes. So they drank some Bundestag, and he says, I can't go back to the Bundestag, which is a beer hall in Göppingen, and say to the military that we're giving you the tanks. So he may be, I'll put it like this. Olaf Scholz may have the spine of a jellyfish, but he knew he couldn't go back to the Bundestag and tell him that he gave up the tanks. So he ended up, even though he shined Lloyd Austin's shoes, no doubt, he still didn't give up the tanks for now. Could happen in the future, but right now he stood up for 1 minute, 1 day, for one time in his miserable, wormy, weak, jellyfish spine stinking life. Olaf Scholz said no. My God, the neocons are in deep and serious trouble. If Olaf Scholz, if one of the weakest, most spineless creatures that this universe has ever created, a sponge has more spine than him. You ever walk on the beach and you see literally a jellyfish on the sand and it looks gross? It looks like a glob of goo. That's Olaf Scholz's spine. No, that glob of goo is titanium. It's black diamond compared to the mushiness of Olaf Scholz's spine. And if your empire is in so much trouble that Olaf Scholz is telling you no, man, you have fallen dramatically. So that's where I might as well end it there. That is where the neocons have lowered themselves, have degraded themselves to the point that even Olaf Scholz has to tell them no. They are screwed. Game, set, and match. The weakest human being in the history of human beings has been forced to tell Lloyd Austin, we ain't giving up the tanks. My God, the Neocon project is done, and there's nothing they can do about it. Last thing I'll mention is Davos. The billionaires are supposed to go to Davos, Klaus Schwab and Soros and all these people. And what happened this year? Soros is like, hey, they're like, hey, Soros, you going to Davos? Oh, I got a golfing engagement that week. They're calling like Elon Musk. Hey, what about Davos? He's like, you gotta be freaking kidding me. Come on. A bunch of Epstein Island hugging pedophile freaks. No, thanks. I'll pass on that one. You literally have like very, very rich people and billionaires like, I ain't, get out of here. Davos, the cool kids don't go to Davos anymore. You'll find people like spineless jellyfish, like, oh, I don't know. I bet you Olaf Scholz was there. Oh, I bet Olaf Scholz had a good old time wiggling around there with his spineless self. So the bottom line is the cool kids ain't going there no more. People have figured them out, and it ain't cool anymore. And here's the bottom line: if it ain't cool, it can't run the world. It can't run the world if a lot of powerful people don't see it as cool. So now you've got people like sending their emissaries. You got like very powerful people like, yeah, I ain't going. Who are you going to send? Oh man, oh, you got nobody to send? The janitor ain't doing nothing. Yeah, okay. You got people literally showing up in a janitor's uniform with like one of those little ties. Hi, my name is Bob. Hey, who are you? I'm representing Toyota and General Motors, both. And what do you do there? Are you the CEO? No. COO? No. What do you do there? I work in a mailroom, actually, and I didn't want to go, but they told me somebody had to go, so I guess I'm the mailroom guy. What do we do here anyway? Hey, where's the free food? Drinks? Do we got drinks? Where's the babes? I heard there was babes, right? They sent the mailroom guys. Davos is pathetic. Davos is falling apart. And what did they do at Davos? One of the another reasons why they didn't want to go, what they do? They go to Davos and literally people just quit. Like the woman from New Zealand, she goes to Davos. She's like, oh my God, look at these friggin' maniacs. Hey, what do you say? And now the leader of New Zealand, what do you have to say? She's like, I quit. What do you mean? I am. You got to be freaking kidding me. Look at these freaks. I'm done. Klaus Schwab and this guy's an evil Lex Luthor looking supervillain hero. I'm out. Literally, Davos was the place where you go to quit your job as the prime minister. That's what it is now. You go there to just say, you know, I was going to do another 2 or 3 terms, but you got to be freaking kidding me. I'm out of here. You people are freaking nuts. And you're embarrassing me, really. You're embarrassing me. I'm embarrassed to say I went to Davos. I'm out. I'm not hanging around with the mailroom guy from Toyota and General Motors anymore. I'm not hanging around with some guy that looks like Lex Luthor, just doesn't have that kind of world power anymore. Elon Musk has bought Twitter. There's nothing you guys can do about it. I'm done. Davos, I'm out. So there are a lot of people who were afraid of Davos in the past and thought they run the world. Davos is kind of falling apart. And what did they do? They went there. What do you think we ought to do? More tanks for Ukraine. That's the best they could do. Think about it. What a perfect example of Davos. Ukraine is collapsing before our very eyes. The Neocon project going for bubbling down into quicksand with the Ukraine project, right? And the people at Davos, the best they could do was say, we got to send more tanks. And literally, they're going so broke. One of these people got up and said, hey, yeah, it's kind of expensive in Ukraine. Perhaps we could get private money for Ukraine. That's an idea. What do you think, guys? And all these people are like, ooh, yeah, they're going to pass in the hat. They literally passed the hat for Ukraine. They passed around the hat. It was like, hey, we need to send tanks. And country after country was like, yeah, but we can't really afford eggs right now. Like, somebody give me a hat. Oh, righty, there you go. What do you have for Ukraine? Pass this thing around, pass the hat around, throw in a couple of dollars. They look, there's like somebody threw in their watch. There's like, you know, some Canadian dollars that aren't any good anymore. And they, you know, it's like passing around the church, the plate in church. You know, somebody slaps the bottom of it so you'll hear the coins jingle and it'll sound like you put some money in, but you didn't really, right? So they went to Ukraine. They were denigrated to the point where they passed the hat for Ukraine at Davos. They went to Davos. They passed the hat for Ukraine. How embarrassing is that? That's what they did. They went to Davos. The prime minister of New Zealand walked the hell out and quit. A bunch of idiots stood around and said something about global warming, and as they flew in on their jet that burns like 500 gallons of JP5 jet fuel per hour, and everybody looked at them and like, you people look like idiots, really? What are you talking about here? One person flew in on a private jet, so you could tell me I got to use stinking plastic straws? Get out of here! You people are insane, right? And the prime minister of New Zealand quit, and then they passed the hat for Ukraine, and then, of course, as we know, in came the hookers, and then it's time to go. That's pretty much Davos now. Davos has collapsed. It's all falling apart. It's all going to pieces, and that's that. Well, that's it, you guys. Let me look. Let me see what we got in the way of super chat. Sparky says, George's Chris Wray and Brian Kemp are recent Davos wannabe. Exactly. Georgia, Chris Wray. Yeah, you know, now the FBI, think about it. The FBI's at Davos. Oh boy, you know, you sure have fallen. George Soros was there. Now you got some idiot from the FBI who's afraid that he's going to be investigated for Russiagate. Davos was mostly wannabes this time, not too many cool kids. It's a joke. It has become a joke even amongst the rich people. Next, Edward Bernays says, Olaf Scholz in the tanks. Girl, you too bad. Oh, he's pathetic. Olaf Scholz, I always have to expose him as the pathetic little worm that he is. Spineless dude. But he finally, he wasn't allowed to give away the tanks. He would have gave them away. He would have cried, but he'd have gave them away. All right. Debo, the Black Panther, says, I believe Russia is done with deal making. To make a deal, you need a viable partner. The West has shown that they can't be trusted. Was it one of the guys of the Black Panthers said something like, he said, for nonviolence to work, your adversary has to have a conscience. I think the Russians have figured that one out. And the Russians, again, they still got lots of artillery laying around, and they ain't ashamed to use it. JF says, oh, thanks a lot, JF. Super sticker. Let's keep going. Okay. Stanley Park, thanks a lot. Paisley Park, wasn't that Prince's Records? Paisley Park, Stanley Park. Thanks a lot, Stanley. Let's see if anybody else has questions. Nigerian government are committing giant genocide on the Biafran people. Wouldn't surprise me. I had a connection at some point to the Nigerian government. Briefly. Thank you, Jesus Martinez. Thank you, Jesus. And we're going to go to the bottom and see if we missed any super stickers. I think the first one I remember was Brother Spark, the Sparkster, Sparky. Thanks a lot, Sparky. Let's look on Rockfin and see what people have to say on Rockfin. See what they got to say on Rockfin. Arden. All right. Thank you. Now, Bill Wilson. What a great American name. He's got to be American, but a name like Bill Wilson. That's like growing up, but there was, in America, you had friends like Dave Jones, Bill Wilson, Tom Smith. Those are the kind of names you have in America. Tom Smith. Mary bringer of death is better. That which doesn't kill you makes you stronger. All right. Anything else? Well, thank you very much, everyone. Oh. Andre Gang, super sticker. Thanks a lot, Andre. Thanks a lot, everybody. Certainly appreciate it. I'm tired, so I'm going to hit the sack. I'll end by saying this. Thanks, everybody. Certainly appreciate everyone. Don't forget, at Garland Nixon on Twitter, Garland.Nixon on Instagram, just plain old Garland Nixon on Facebook. If you want to email me, it's garlandin@gmail.com. If you have like a good story or article or something you want to share with me, that would be awesome. Lots of great stuff out there, the Duran and the new Atlas. I've been watching what's that called, Redacted, lately. They do a lot of good work. But at any rate, lots of great stuff going on out there. Lots of good alternative media. The Gray Zone, you can't miss the Gray Zone. They're good. And then over on Rockfin, there's The Last American Vagabond and Slow News Day. There's lots of great stuff. Everybody's there. Of course, Jimmy Dore. But I'll just say this to end up. Don't forget, anything you can do to help keep the channel going is great. We've got, if you can, patreon.com. If you can do $3, $5, or $1 million a month, it doesn't matter. Whatever you can do on Patreon is helpful. Follow me on my Telegram channel. If you don't like Patreon, or if you don't like PayPal, because PayPal information is there, garlandin@gmail.com. You can always do buymeacoffee.com, buymeacoffee.com/garlandin, and for some damn reason they stuck an H on it, garlandnh. And of course, there's the Cash App info. And most importantly, Rockfin, in case they one day throw me off of here, if they throw me off of YouTube, I will be on Rockfin. Rockfin is a wonderful free speech platform that doesn't have advertisements. So it's like YouTube, only better. It's got great sound, great video. Everybody's on Rockfin, the Duran, all of those people. So you can watch them there. If you're sick of watching your Duran with advertisements, go to Rockfin. No advertisements. Isn't that fantastic? Watch all of everything you want. So a lot of the people that you've been watching on YouTube, why not go watch them on Rockfin, ROKFIN.com? And they're a lot, most of them are there. And you don't have to deal with the stinking advertisements all the time. Now, the reason they don't have advertisements, they don't charge advertisers, and that's the same reason that Rockfin, there's lots of new platforms that are free speech platforms. That's the reason they can be a free speech platform. However, they do one thing they do if you can afford it. You can join my Rockfin channel. Please do. No charge. You can see all my stuff. However, if you can afford to be a Rockfin subscriber, it's $14.99 a month. But if you join for 1 year, they give you 2 months free. So it's $9.99 a month if you join for a year. And then you can see all the premium stuff. Everybody on Rockfin, all the creators do minimum of one premium show per week. And that's for the subscribers only. Mine is every Wednesday morning from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. with my good and dear friend, Scott Ritter. So it's well worth the $9.99 because you get to see the Scott Ritter show 1 hour for the premium. That's that's the only 1 hour I do for premium stuff. Even when I have Scott Ritter, sometimes otherwise it's not part of the premium. That's what I do. That's my 1 hour premium to really thank my subscribers and to give them something to make it their worth. If you can, worth their while, if you can afford it. If you can't afford it, don't worry about it. Just become a member at no charge and enjoy Rockfin, a free speech platform with no advertisements. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Let me just make sure that I didn't miss anybody's super chat. There we go. We got another one. Rob Juno says, thanks, G. Does the collective West need a constitutional restart to realign means and motives? Absolutely. Dan Lazare wrote an interesting book about that. I forgot the name of it right here. Dan Lazare, Lazare, where he makes an argument that the Constitution of America needs to be changed, that it's old and there's a lot of things that just don't work anymore that really need to be changed. So, but thanks a lot, everybody. It's almost 11 o'clock on a Saturday night. Thank you very much. Peace. I am out.